Okay, today we're going to finish up talking about promotions by looking at the management of the sales force. This is an important area to look at because if people go into marketing for a career, it's typical that you start out doing some sales. But usually you move on past that. Some people like to be salespeople and they'll stay that way for their lives. They're born salespeople and that's what they like to do. But it's typical that you use the sales effort to learn the industry, learn the customers and the competitors, and then you move on from there. One of the areas that you might move on to is in the sales management area where you're overseeing the sales force. So today we're just going to be looking at that, things we need to consider, and what kind of pressures and problems we do have in managing the sales effort. As with everything, we start by setting objectives. Now, if we're setting objectives for our sales force, it's obvious that we need sales. And usually this takes the form of a quota, where we're looking for you to make a certain amount of sales. That's what is expected. There's going to be some questions asked if you don't do that. Typically, you might get a bonus if you go over quotas. In addition to that, though, it's very common that a sales manager might give his salespeople other objectives. For example, it may be, I want you to sign 2 new customers this fiscal year, or I want you to try and penetrate the school market, which we have not gotten into yet. You know, there may be some other goals other than just a level of sales as well. One of the hardest things we have to do in the sales management area is working with the sales force in terms of where they can sell and who they sell to. What we have listed up here under sales territories are some of the common ways we divide up an area. For example, we might divide up a sales area geographically, where somebody has the Indianapolis area, somebody has Cincinnati, somebody has Chicago. And so you're responsible for selling within those geographic boundaries. That can be very difficult, though. What if somebody based in Indiana opens a second location in Cincinnati? Who's responsible for that? Or what if the Indianapolis area gets so large that the person who grew this business can't service it anymore, and we have to bring in a second salesperson for that area, split that territory, thereby splitting commissions? This can be really, really hard area to deal with, as you can imagine. We could also divide up the target market according to industry specifications. Are we selling to manufacturers? Are we selling to service providers? To people who are going to use our product as component parts or resell it? You know, we could specialize in different types of industries that way. We can also divide up the market based on the size of the customer. Again, we're focusing more on B2B here, but the larger customer is called a key account or a major account. Let me give you an idea. I mentioned before when I was with Kraft that that's what I sold to. I sold to large chain accounts that brought in $1 million or more annually for Kraft. These were called major accounts. I was a major account manager. The last account I signed before I left was, I don't think I should name them, but a very large, well-known national company who was just coming out of Michigan. They were just starting to expand. And I signed them to a contract. Well, I left soon after that, and what I found out after I left is Kraft, the headquarters, looked at this and said, this is going to be a huge account. We're going to take it away from the major account manager who had it at that time and make it a national house account. We're going to manage it out of the headquarters. If I still had that account and I was paid on commission, can you imagine how upset I might have been that they took that away from me? Now, it turns out I was paid on salary, so that was a non-issue, and I wasn't there any longer, so that didn't apply either. But you can understand where, in trying to service a customer the best, you might actually end up hurting some of your sales force and causing some conflict. This is one of the most difficult areas for the sales force manager to deal with. What about when we need to get salespeople into our organization? You know, recruiting can be a challenge. Putting an ad in the paper usually brings in a lot of non-qualified people. And you end up wasting your time sorting through resumes and talking to people who really aren't going to work out. It's common to go to colleges, use college fairs to recruit, to ask people who are currently selling for you for references. But the most common recruiting method that's actually used in business today is called pirating. And that is taking a good salesperson away from another company. There's some ethical questions involved. How do you go about recruiting this person? Should you do it? There may also be some contractual issues. For example, I shouldn't say most, but many companies, when you sign your contract, go to work for them, you agree to not sell or not work for a competitor for a certain amount of years after you leave them. This is called a non-competing clause. Very common practice. So you may not be able to take a salesperson away from a competitor, but it doesn't even have to be a salesperson in the same industry. If somebody's good at selling, they can sell any product that they believe in and they're comfortable with. It's a very transferable skill from industry to industry, so you don't have to concentrate on looking for somebody already in your industry. Okay. How do we actually find out who we want, though? Once we start getting the application in and seeing the resumes, we got to put them through the interview. And a lot of you have probably gone through interviews before, and they probably weren't as bad as what you were expecting. You hear all these horror stories about interviews, and usually it doesn't occur. They do happen in sales. The reason is, in sales, we are looking for people who can think on their feet, who can handle problems, who can handle rejection and tough times, who are good decision makers, have a good sense of humor, very quick thinkers. It's pretty hard to find that out with a standard interview. So it's typical that we ask questions that are a little more difficult. For example, you may be asked, which do you prefer to play, chess or poker? What are they looking for? Why do they care? Well, if over a series of questions you answer kind of in the same vein and you're picking the poker answer in those types of questions, what you're telling them is you're aggressive and you're a risk taker, that you're not afraid of a challenge. That's what they're looking for in a salesperson. The people who are more comfortable with the chess, like structure, like organization, planning, strategic thinking, wonderful, wonderful qualities, but not necessarily the ones we're looking for in the salesperson. So you will come across questions that are a little unusual, questions that make you think, oh my gosh, how can I answer that? Many times they're just testing how you think. I had a sales manager in a class one time, and I was giving this lecture, and he volunteered a question that he asks all the time. He said, I tell them to imagine that they're coming home after a horrible, horrible day at work. All they want to do is take a bath and go to bed. And so they go upstairs, open their bathroom door, and there in the bathtub stands an elephant. What are they going to do? And I looked at this guy and I said, what in the world do you want from them? What are you looking for with that question? He says, I want an answer. I want somebody who, when they're faced with the unexpected, can come up with something. It doesn't matter what. He said, I've had all sorts of answers. I've had people say, close the door and go to bed dirty, get my gun and shoot it. He said one guy was obviously an aficionado when it comes to elephants, and he went off on this long tangent about how to tell which breed of elephant it was, and based on what type of breed, what it would be worth, and all this. The most common answer, he said, people call the zoo or the police. He said, I just didn't want to hire the person that went, I need somebody who can think on their feet. So, my point here is not to make anybody nervous about going into a sales interview. It's to prepare you. These questions are aimed at finding out something about your traits, your ability to handle the challenges on the job. And if you've thought through what these traits would be, what they're going to be looking for, what they need on the job, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine, but you need to be prepared. Once we have you hired, we need to train you. The amount of training, how long it takes, is completely dependent on your experience and the complexity of your product and industry. It's going to vary greatly from selling something pretty simplistic, which may take a one-day training period, to working at a computer manufacturer where they take 9, 12 months, sometimes even 16 months in their training program. Great variance. Usually what we see, though, is a combination of hands-on and classroom training. The hands-on training gets you out there with an experienced salesperson, so you learn the industry, learn the company, learn the customers. You get to see what it's like. You tend to pick things up pretty quickly in that way, too. The classroom training, if you are new to sales, if you've never sold before, they'll talk about how to sell. They'll talk about the process. If you're not new, classroom training usually focuses more on what they expect from their salespeople, their ethical standards, and company policies, product information, those kinds of things, processes, how you actually put a sales order in, etc. So we need to make sure we're training our salespeople appropriately using a combination of these two. Now comes the biggie, rewarding. There are so many good salespeople that do not go into sales because they're scared to death of commissions. And I understand that, but you shouldn't be scared of that. As I said in the last segment, most selling today is looking at building a relationship. Sales are repetitive. They make repeat orders over a period of time. A commission means you're getting a percentage of your sales. Okay? Well, the comment that we hear from most people is, I got mortgage or rent payment, I got a car payment, I can't worry every month if I'm going to make those payments. You don't. Usually when you start out, you are paid a salary with a small commission as you're learning. And as you get more experienced, your salary will drop and your commission percentage goes up. Okay. Well, as you're starting out, you're starting to make some customers, get initial people signed on. When they're signed on, they sign a contract. They make a monthly order, so to speak, depending on your industry and your product. That's a constant. Each month you're trying to add new customers and bring that base up and up and up. You're not starting from scratch each time. You have these set orders, this base that you're working from. And as you develop that base, your salary goes down, that commission percentage goes up. That's huge. Until you're at the point where you're all commission, there's no limit on your earning potential once you hit that 100% commission. The more money you make, the company's happy because that means they're making all that much more in sales too. So that's not a drawback. What if you lose one of those major customers, though? Or what if the economy just goes shroop? And that was a technical term, by the way. But the economy takes a dive and sales just dry up temporarily. Well, we typically have what we call draw accounts. And draw accounts are what the company provides, allows you to take money out, to see you through your expenses, to see you through those rough periods. They recognize this may happen, that your income takes a dive and you need to see through that. That happens. If you're a good salesperson, they don't want to lose you. They're going to help you through that. Shouldn't be a concern for you. Now, there are times when people will be straight salary, such as I was. And the reason a straight salary might be appropriate is if you're involved in a lot of non-selling tasks. Like what I would do is I'd go in the kitchen with some of my customers and help them with recipes and creating things. And I would spend days in there. And that's days that I'm not out there trying to get a new customer. I'm just trying to keep current customers happy and help them with their usages a little bit. Well, because of all those non-selling tasks, if I was being paid commission, I wouldn't be getting paid that much. So I was paid on salary. It all depends on what your job objectives are. If they want you to keep customers happy, if you're out there getting new sales all the time, that really determines how you are paid. But please, if sales interests you, do not let the thought of commission scare you. It shouldn't. And finally, as with, again, everything we do, we need to evaluate our effectiveness. So we need to evaluate the sales force and see if they're doing their job. The most common method we do, of course, is looking at their sales levels. Are they hitting quota? Are they selling what we expect them to sell? Do they have the number of customers that we anticipated? We also want to do some drive-throughs with them where we're accompanying them on their sales tours, meeting with their customers. We want to get a good idea if they're adhering to our ethical standards and the processes we have laid down. One thing we want to watch out, though, is we don't want to over-control a good salesperson. As long as they're meeting what we need them to do and they're behaving in the ethical way we have set out, let them do their job. Just stay out of their way. A good salesperson is very hard to replace, so let them do what they know how to do best. Okay, let's wrap this up for you today. In summary, salespeople need to be given proper training and direction. They need to know what the goals are. However, micromanaging will decrease their effectiveness. Let the salespeople sell. It's what they were born to do. Secondly, the sales manager needs to handle the difficult situations as quickly and fairly as possible. Sometimes there is no fair solution, such as dividing up a territory. It just has to be done. Don't delay it. Don't apologize. Make your decision quick and firmly and go on from there. Some people are going to be unhappy, and unfortunately that's the nature of the beast. It just exists that way. I hope you have a good day. I'll see you next time.